Anytime there's a pregnancy or a baby to be born, one interesting and important topic is the name, right? Do you have the names picked out? If it's a boy, if it's a girl, are those family names, we ask? I happen to believe names are a big deal. I mean, generally, we only get one chance at it, right? Either the names that we're given or the names that we give generally stick, although I did know a woman whose family name was Barney, and she changed her name legally to Bonnie. So names are important. Kevin and Sarah just had twins. They named their baby girl Scarlett and Lacey. Our daughter, one of our daughters is pregnant, and she and her husband know that it's a boy, and they've decided that his name shall be James. They still haven't decided on a second name yet, so I've offered James Bond, or maybe LeBron James. And so far, they haven't found the humor in my suggestions. Names are important. The reason I think they're important is because names may have some influence on how people see us. I've read some things that suggest that teachers and coaches and others have higher expectations of those with, quote, strong names, and therefore treat them differently. But names also may be important because of how we think of ourselves with such and such a name. In other words, is our name a name that we're proud of, or one that we can grow into? I mean, I have a friend who had a daughter she named Amelia, because she wanted her to bring up the idea of the flying pioneer, right? Amelia Earhart. You get it? So as you know, we're using George Frederick Handel's The Messiah as a guide through our Advent into Christmas. And we've listened to the words and the music for years. And we're always taken by this section that we heard. To us, a child is given, followed by the names of the child: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And as we talked a bit last week, it was layman Charles Jennings who wrote and supplied the text to Handel to write the music. Jennings got his text completely from Scripture, using the lectionary as a guide. He wrote a musical oratorio that was a life of Christ. However, he then discovered that he didn't have the talent, really, to put the music to the text. So he asked his friend Handel if he would consider doing this. And as you heard me say last week, it was a lifesaver for Handel. He was broke. He was suffering from some really severe physical ailments and from bouts of depression. A deeply religious man who had roots in as a Lutheran Christian, the Messiah and the Messiah turned his life back into a positive direction. The words Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace are, of course, from Isaiah 9. But many listening for the first time, maybe, are surprised that these names are not from the New Testament, but from the Old. In fact, these words were written by Isaiah the prophet in 700 BC. It was a time of deep darkness for the Jews. The former glory days of Kings Saul and David and Solomon were over. Israel had been defeated, had been split into two different kingdoms. The northern kingdom had just been ransacked when Isaiah wrote these words of hope. Into the darkness will come a light. Into the midst of bloody battles, a child will be born. And here are his names: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. What is amazing, 2,000 years on this side of Jesus' birth, and 2,700 years from the time Isaiah wrote these names, is how these names are so descriptive of the Jesus we have come to know. Wonderful Counselor. There are so many times in your life and mine when we need a wonderful counselor. Times when we need advice and a way forward, a way to understand, a way to gain perspective. A high school counselor helps a student imagine themselves in a certain college. A financial counselor helps us understand our finances and a plan for the future. A mental health counselor or a therapist helps us get a hold of our feelings and our actions that accompany it, enable us to come to terms with our past, with our losses and confusion, and try to put a path forward for us to travel. A lawyer, often called a counselor, gives us legal advice. Clergy are often counselors, helping with life and faith and God questions. Marriage counselors can sometimes save a marriage depending on the circumstances and the couple's willingness to give it a go for another time. Everybody needs a wonderful counselor at certain times in our life. Historians point out that the country's best presidents have had wonderful counselors, people giving advice, surrounding them, who could tell them the truth no matter what anyone else may have been saying to them. Jesus was a wonderful counselor. Remember when Jesus confronted Zacchaeus, who was literally out on a limb on a tree, this man who had cheated and swindled others his whole life long. And Jesus, rather than scolding, rather than judging or humiliating him in front of all those people, rather invited himself to lunch. What a wonderful counselor. And the woman, you remember, who was about to be stoned to death because of her adultery, remember Jesus' words to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." The story of Jesus is full of Christ, who was a wonderful counselor, compassionate, loving, interacting with people in need of help, in need of a direction. And one of the reasons our prayer life is so important is that Jesus is still a wonderful counselor. Mighty God. That Jesus was born both human and divine, both a God and a human being, is the great mystery of the incarnation. Incarnation is not a word we hear much, really, at Christmas. You haven't received any happy incarnation cards, have you? No, I didn't think so. But incarnation is the word for Christians at Christmas. It's not a word that you'll find in the Bible. It's derived from a Latin word. It literally means a person who embodies in the flesh a deity or spirit. For Christians, incarnation is Jesus who embodies in the flesh God. If you can explain that, you are the smartest person in the world. Our Christmases are filled with the nativity scene of Jesus as a baby, Jesus and Mary. I mean, we love this story. We love baby stories, right? We love the baby Jesus like Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights love the baby Jesus. It's the incarnation, God born in human form. It's a concept that is more complex than Einstein's theory of relativity. Handel and Isaiah call this baby Mighty God. I actually love this name for the baby, Mighty God. It speaks of God's sovereignty, of God who is in control of human history, a God who's in control of the long view, whose purpose is woven into human history, who even weaves our errors and mistakes into God's immediate and ultimate plan. I love an old story that I heard years ago that I think is a metaphor for how God works in human history. This is the way it goes. When a Persian rug is being woven, it is mounted on a large frame which is standing upright. On various stools and ladders beside the rug are perched teenage boys who feed the fabric into the work. The master weaver stands in front of the rug and gives directions to the weavers, to the young weavers on the other side. Sometimes one of the boys will make a mistake. He puts the wrong colored thread in the wrong place. And when that happens, a master weaver does not stop the process or undo the mistake. Rather, if he is a really great artist, he creatively works the thread into a new design. And with that, out comes a beautiful rug, creatively mastered. A mighty God who is in control of human history, who, like a master weaver, takes our goodness and our errors and uses them to accomplish God's great purposes in history. History is not circular, it is linear. And God is working God's purposes out as we move towards God's end time. Everlasting Father. The most important relationship for our development is the relationship we have with our parents. If we're lucky or blessed, we had a good father, a good mother, or one or both. To give Jesus the name of Everlasting Father is to speak of this Messiah in the most intimate of ways. An extensive research study found that a father influences the children's lives in ways that are different from the way a mother-child relationship works. According to the study, loving fathers impart to their children an enhanced capacity to play, more enjoyment of vacations, greater likelihood of being able to use humor as a healthy coping mechanism, less likely in young adulthood to be anxious, and fewer physical, mental, and emotional symptoms while under stress. That comes from the father, apparently. Now, if we were talking about what the mother gives, it would be a list this long, right? So but it is to say, fathers are important. To say that Christ is the Father of us, that He is attentive, caring, loving, and guiding, and that He desires to have a relationship with us like we as fathers desire to have a relationship with our own children, is something we cannot find in any other religion or faith or Eastern or mystical philosophy. And to say that Jesus, the Messiah, is not just a father, but an everlasting Father, is to say He will never be absent and He will never be a distant Father, but Jesus, the Father, will always be with us. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of Messiah I need and want. The Prince of Peace. In this crazy world where wars are the result of human evil, Jesus, as the Prince of Peace, is desperately needed. In a country where 13,000 people are killed every year with guns, Jesus, as the Prince of Peace, is desperately needed. In a country where domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women from age 15 to 40, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined, Jesus, as the Prince of Peace, is desperately needed. On college campuses where 10% of students report that they have been a victim of sexual assault or rape, Jesus, as the Prince of Peace, is desperately needed. Having a Messiah who spoke of peace and whose life embodied peace and peacemaking in a violent culture is a legacy and a teaching that guides all of us who call ourselves after this man, Jesus. Seeking peace in the midst of a conflict or in violence is maybe, just maybe, our most important role as Christians. It's one of the reasons that we are so passionate about justice, and the reason that we keep aligning ourselves with justice causes and justice issues, because we know that without justice, there will be no peace. That often the cause of violence or unrest or war is the result of injustice. You with me? Families sometimes find themselves in conflict. The reasons are complex and complicated, just like we as families are complex and complicated. But the result of family conflict is instability and the absence of a safe haven where children and adults can grow and thrive and flourish and develop and be our best selves and love and serve. Many a home and many a person has been saved by someone in a family who is or becomes a peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers, said Jesus. Jesus was the ultimate peacemaker. So, names are important. The names Isaiah gave the coming Messiah were remarkable in their foretelling. But more remarkable is that Jesus, our Messiah, embodied those names. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. To his end, to his reign, there shall be no end.